Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shirin.
Happy Halloween, everyone. That's when this episode drops.
It's so spooky. It's the best day of the year.
The best day of the year. So when you're listening to this episode, potentially we're off doing something super fun and spooky. So
hopefully taking the little one for the first Halloween.
Oh, I wonder, eh?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Is that a dick move to, like, bring a baby around to get Halloween candy?
I'm pretty sure people must do it,
They
right?
must. I mean, obviously, I'm going to eat the candy, but...
I mean, yeah, that's... you're like, yes, I'm aware that the candy's not really for her.
Yeah, I'm not
giving
it to her.
Not at that age. That's okay. It's fine. You get to profit from it a little bit.
I'm sure parents wouldn't care. They'd be like, oh, yeah.
They'll be like,
I see you.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, yeah, that's it. If you're listening to this the day that the episode drops, it's Halloween proper. Yay! And so, as a little celebration of that, and obviously to wrap up, horror coverage for the month of October, we thought that we would, I guess, take a look at kind of how one of the major film studios that still exists to this day are really the ones that helped to bring a lot of these classic horror stories or monster stories really to the masses in general, and helped to I think they really helped to, I'm not saying that this didn't exist before, because it did happen during the silent film era as well, but they really helped to bring monsters to the forefront of entertainment. And I really feel like they helped to kick off people's love of these types of films in the first
keep
place.
them alive over the years.
100%, because those IPs are still going to
yeah.
this day.
I mean, they've doubled down on them recently, haven't they?
They have, it's true. In the past few years as well, I think we're seeing a bit of a resurgence with things too. So we're just kind of talking a little bit about Universal, how Universal Studios sort of helped to bring the idea of some of these very classic monster stories and sort of scary stories, I guess, to a more mass audience by producing these film adaptations that were extremely popular and well received and are still spoken about and celebrated to this day.
Continue to have adaptations.
Yep, 100%. So it's weird, right? Because I think when we talk about the idea, we're like, oh, Universal monsters, and technically, if you're going from the what created quote unquote the Universal monsters themselves, the first release would have been Dracula.
Right.
It came out in 1931, and that it's the the version that the majority of us know very well, starring Bela Lugosi as Dracula, and kicked off the idea of this sort of very gothic, very creepy kind of monster at the forefront of your production, as opposed to kind of a hidden figure in the background and we're following all the other characters. This one really brought the character front and center.
Well, yes, and Dracula, it's funny because Dracula falls under the monsters, but he's probably the more the humanoid.
Oh, correct, yeah. Yes, one of the more humanoid ones of the ones that have been produced.
Yeah, and batched in with that group.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And it's funny because that's what we largely think of, right? We're like, oh, well, what was the first one? It was Dracula, but technically that's not true.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in 1913, there was a silent film version adapted of Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Okay.
That was produced by Carl Laemmle, who was the person who ran and founded Universal Studios. However, this was still when it existed under I believe its previous name was IMP.
Okay.
And this was prior to him changing the name to Universal. However, this was sort of one of basically the first ones that Carl Laemmle himself had any hand in, and he was the person who he was the godfather of Universal Studios. He was the one who started the studio. He was the one who pushed for these initial projects to happen in the first place, and was very, very widely regarded for that decision.
And up until this point, was there any other horror production going on, or was it really just kind of this was a pioneer?
So I mean, okay, if we take a look at certain things, right? We talked about this when we were talking about adaptations and stuff to do with Dracula because of a production like Nosferatu, which was a German film that was released in 1922. It's a silent film, and it is a pseudo-adaptation of Dracula in which the character names and things are changed, obviously, because they technically did not have the rights to the original source material, the novel from Bram Stoker. And we've talked about this before, and I think largely a lot of people are aware of that. His wife was very angry. There was an attempt to have all copies destroyed. Like, there was a lot of Nosferatu. Yes, exactly. That was a little bit later. But yeah, I would say maybe this version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, there were some other silent films that leaned into these things around that time as well. However, from what I was reading anyway, this was one that was definitely like one of the earliest versions of like an adaptation of a story like this at that time,
Right.
in particular. And this was also so interesting too. I came across this. There's a book talker whose account I love. Her name's Sinead Hanna. She's based in the UK, and she gives. She's like a horror book talker specifically. She gives recommendations for different types of things, like, rapid fire, like reviews of stuff, all sorts of different things. I love her. I love her takes on stuff. Her recommendations are always fascinating. They never steer me wrong. I've picked up multiple books due to a recommendation that she's given in a video. So she's great, and I really love her for like very horror specific stuff on in the book talk sphere. I came across a video of hers while I was taking a look at some things for today's episode, and I did not know this, but it turns out when Robert Louis Stevenson was writing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the first place, which I believe was published in 1886, he was. I think a lot of people seem to think that he was inspired mostly by like Edinburgh as a whole, the very macabre sort of history of the city itself, and a lot of the different things that took place there. However, apparently, a lot of his inspiration came from the story of a particular man named Deacon Brodie, who was a very prominent businessman and cabinet maker at the time. Or earlier on, I should say. He had been somebody who had, built himself up completely from like very lowly beginnings to like a very prominent, extremely well-respected businessman in Edinburgh and the area. And apparently was basically charged with like all cabinet making for like every household that you could think of. And and he was like extremely well liked, nice, calm, polite, like very like professional with people, and really, I think my understanding is did very good work with his team. However, it turns out that because he had all of this knowledge from building all of these cabinets and doing all of these things and going into people's homes and seeing what was going on, he also at night would go in and steal things from the cabinets.
Oh my God.
The goods that people were putting into the different cabinets that they had in their homes, and everybody was like, wow, why are all of these thefts happening? Why do these people know exactly what kind of goods I have hidden in my cabinets at home?
I wonder, how could we do an investigation and figure out who the culprit is?
And apparently it turns out that it was Deacon Brodie who had been doing this. So I think Stevenson was inspired by, basically, it seems, the duality of a person like this, right? How you can be one person forward presenting, but then behind closed doors you are completely different and doing something that people would not expect you to do.
Yeah, I was wondering how this would correlate with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm like, okay, were they cabinet makers? No, they weren't.
No.
Like, where?
No, he's a doctor.
Yes, I know. That's why I was like, was he a carpenter?
You're
for
like,
fun?
sorry, what?
Like, where am I going with this?
Yeah, exactly. No, not at all.
No, that's really fascinating that like he saw that story and he thought, how can I take it one step further? Which is essentially what most authors do.
Oh, 100%. They're inspired by something that may seem innocuous to a lot of people.
Make it like, either satire or they exaggerate the story.
Yep.
And, thinking about Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde being almost like the beginnings of like
Isn't that fun? And it's such
monsters.
Because it's such a great story
It
too.
is.
The idea of a duality of a person.
Yes.
It's such a fascinating story, which is why I think like we still see it so frequently to this day. I do feel like it's one that's a little bit underrated.
It is.
I'd love to almost see like more versions
like
of
a
it.
proper adaptation.
I mean, there
of
have
it.
been some. So, I mean, a number of years ago, there was an adaptation that was done. I forget if it was through the BBC or something else, but it's just called Hyde.
Oh,
Or Jekyll,
yes.
excuse me, just Jekyll, if I'm not mistaken. Starring a very prominent Irish actor whose name I cannot remember for the bloody life of me right now, but he's great. He's in The Hobbit and a bunch of other stuff, and he plays the title character, and it was like a several-part series that was like a modernized version of it. I feel like that is one of the best interpretations of the story that I've seen before, which it's very good. So interestingly, that's it. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's kind of what came from like the earliest iterations of this. And then in 1925, also famously, again 6 years prior to Dracula's release, Universal also produced a silent film version of The Phantom of the Opera, which is based on the novel by Gaston Leroux.
Does the Phantom of the Opera fall in the monsters as well? Does it really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I mean, they it's like, I feel like he's like a sub monster because he is a person.
Well, maybe for my information, Megan, which ones fall under Universal Monsters?
Well, technically, everything that I looked at that was like quote unquote Universal monster films, Phantom of the Opera shows up on all those lists.
Interesting.
So I was like, okay, sure.
So you got, but does Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde fall under there?
It doesn't seem to as frequently. I think some people lump it in and some
it
people
in.
don't, because there is a monstrous element to the story.
Oh,
so
definitely.
It does work.
I mean, that one is the story of how we have a monster inside of all of us.
Exactly.
And how we actually seek to bring this monster out. We don't hide from them.
No, we don't always hide from them. Yeah, that's it. And the idea of like, you know, your ego and your id and all that kind of stuff, those different sort of sides of your psyche, essentially, and how they manifest themselves. Yes, technically, yes. So then in 1925, we got Phantom of the Opera, starring Lon Chaney, which is extremely prolific and well regarded. Lon Chaney was a really big draw for Universal in general, because he was like I believe he was referred to as the man of 1,000 faces. He did all of his own makeup for the productions.
Oh, wow.
And in doing so, that's it. He crafted he crafted the types of makeups for these particular characters that are still visualized to this day when picturing, like his version of Phantom of the Opera. He also played Quasimodo in a version of Hunchback of Notre Dame around the same time period as well. Did like a lot of the makeup for that also.
Okay.
And these are things that are widely considered, like when we think of like the aesthetic of these characters, as there are remakes and things that happen, we remember visually what that look was in that much, much, much older property, even if you've never seen it. You know?
It's true, because you're always going to compare it. Like, once you've had one, then you're always like, oh, well, you know, how can we build off of it? How can we make it better?
And I mean, I think that the Universal monster films are largely the jumping off point visually in terms of the character design for every other version that would come after. Look at Dracula, right? Like,
always got that cape and the slick back hair.
Could look like anyone, really. Like, it wouldn't necessarily matter. However, it's just, and when you yourself, when you're just like thinking about, you're like, oh, Dracula, like, who's the first person that pops into your head? It's Bela Lugosi as that character.
Yeah.
Because he's just the person who set the tone aesthetically for how Count Dracula should look.
Correct.
Right?
And same with all these, to your point.
And same with all of them. And then, like, so that's it. Dracula's released in 1931. The same year, Frankenstein is released.
Okay.
Yeah, which is based on, obviously, Mary Shelley's 1818 novel of the same name as well. And that one is another one, too, that aesthetically, when we're like, Frankenstein's monster, who does Frankenstein's monster look like? Well, he looks like Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster.
Right.
You know?
Yes,
Tall, squared-off
always.
head, the bolts, and everything that you see, the very, like, squared-off shoulders, very blocky looking, that's what you think of.
But they could have made him look like anything. And it makes you wonder what the merch would have looked like even now.
Oh, God, yeah.
And Frankenstein is always a big square dude with the bolts, and, well, he's green now.
And he's green a lot of the time. And, like, in the older film, like, he doesn't quite, I mean, he is kind of green, but not really.
Well, it would have been black and white, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how they did the makeup for it, but anyway, yeah. It's just interesting. It's just interesting to like think about these things, because you're like, yeah, but then that's what this character looks like. That's what this character looks like in your head. And yes, obviously, in more modern interpretations, they change aspects of things. Oftentimes, what you see with like the Dracula character is that he becomes like maybe more romantic in a sense. I mean, for the time though, my understanding is,
does he sparkle?
Oh God, my understanding is, for the time though, Bela Lugosi was like regarded as a very handsome man. Like, the ladies who went to the movie were like, damn, yeah. So,
but that's always your vampire persona.
Yeah,
though.
and I mean, I think it's all. I think that a lot of that, for me anyway, would be based on the way that he plays the character. He's very intense. I think he would have been very suggestive and seductive, particularly for that time period. And So that probably lent itself very well to it. And he looks quite distinguished as well, which again, I think would have played well, particularly to an audience at the time. But even now, to an extent, you expect like a level of suave.
Well, you do, because, and it's, it's interesting. I'm thinking about it now while we're talking about it. Any vampire like movie or show that's come out since where the vampires are more monstery looking.
Yes, yeah.
You're kind of like, I don't know.
People
like,
have a moment of confusion over it.
Yeah,
almost.
because you're just like, I feel like the vampires would be more human looking and like attractive humans, because the whole point is that that's how they lure their prey,
Yeah.
Whereas the other monsters just look like monsters,
Yes, yeah.
and the vampires you expect to look like suave
Yeah,
humans.
you're like, I kind of need them to be hot. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and like when they're kind of monstery looking, you're like, ugh.
Yeah, it makes it more of like a monster
animalistic
movie. Definitely, yeah. They have, as soon as they have them in more of like a bat-like kind of form,
or like just like big teeth, or like Buffy vampires.
Yeah, you mentioned, but without the teeth, the Buffy vampires are hot also.
That's true. Because
they just look like James Marsters, and you're like, okay. Anyway,
like
but also because I feel like you're right though, to your point, like we mentioned, I think in a previous episode when we were talking about Dracula, right, that like even more recently in the last couple of years, Last Voyage of the Demeter was released, and as you mentioned, that is based on one specific chapter of Dracula, the novel by Bram Stoker, which is the captain's log when he makes his journey from Transylvania to Britain, and slowly kills the entire crew to eat them on the way there.
Right.
And so there's this entire film was released. It's not great, whatever. And in that one, I will say that the Dracula character is a monster. He looks like a big bad, kind of. Like he has like that type of aesthetic. Like it's monstrous looking. And so it almost turns it into a different kind of movie. I don't feel like I'm in a Dracula film necessarily, even though technically I am.
Because as soon as they turn them into an animalistic beast, you're not expecting any type of like intellectual exchange.
No, not at
happen.
all. The character never speaks throughout the entire film.
Yeah,
so.
And the whole point is like, okay, just kill it,
Yeah, like you become more like you. I guess like there's such a cool and interesting duality of the Count Dracula character, like more as we know him as like a more personified human version, in that he can have the duality of at once being alluring and also scary.
Yes.
And that usually that makes for a more interesting character.
Well, the fear factor with Dracula is in part the fact that he is so humanoid.
Yep.
Is that you don't know that he's a monster until it's too late.
Yep.
But you could, I'm thinking about like the few monsters that we've mentioned so far. It seems that Universal has like a focus on the ones, of the three that we've talked about, that are more humanoid, less of like an animal or a beast,
I feel like a lot of those ones that Universal created came less from the adaptations that they did, actually, right? Because even the couple of other examples that I have, right, I just mentioned Frankenstein. Even Frankenstein's monster is made up of reanimated human body parts, so there is a humanoid quality to that character as well. He speaks, he can enunciate,
and isn't he quite gentle? Isn't that the whole thing?
Yes, yeah. It's very sad because, of course,
the real monster is Dr.
Frankenstein and everything that's it. And it's very sad, the idea of the character and how much he suffers when he's brought back into a world that he did not ask to be brought back into, and like all of those things. It's sad. And if you read the novel, obviously very much paints that picture, and you are meant to sympathize with the monster, which sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. And I'll mention something later a little bit about the upcoming adaptation of it that I came across, that I saw some people having discourse about, that I thought was very interesting. But anyway, so that also came out in the same year, and I think that at that point, those two releases in the same year exploded. Come on. Those are arguably the most iconic Universal monsters, obviously.
Yeah.
But just some of the most iconic characters in horror literature to begin with as well. So then when you take that and you adapt it and adapt it well, it's just going to start an entire like domino effect post that, right? So technically the next one that was also a monster movie based on a book was actually in 1933 when The Invisible Man was released. So
Yeah, I
that's
was
based on
wondering when we were.
H.G. Wells'
Yeah,
novel.
I was wondering when we were going to get to that one
Exactly.
because that's another human.
Another human, exactly, another human. That one, I feel like The Invisible Man is the closest in tone to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
Correct.
probably. If you have to like
Yes.
pick another one that's sort of like right, because again, there's the idea of duality. Although in H.G. Wells' original story, the Dr. Griffin, who has created essentially a formula or a potion that gives you the capability of becoming invisible. He is already basically depicted as a madman in the story. In the film, it's the potion that drives him mad.
Okay.
It makes him crazy, and then when he can't turn back, he just goes on like a rampage, basically. But in the novel, there's already the idea of him maybe being like a psychopath of some sort already exists. Like it is already there. He's already not a good person.
Well, I mean, there'd have to be a bit of something there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's it. You'd have to get like a little bit of that. And then beyond the monster side of things, I guess, also there were multiple different versions made over the years, but in 1932 we got Edgar Allan Poe's Murders in the Rue Morgue, which was I believe the first ever adaptation of that story. The Black Cat in 1934. There were like a multitude of ones that would come after, and then obviously, of course, we got all of the other monsters themselves who aren't specifically based on books. So we got the Mummy,
Yep.
the Creature from the Black Lagoon, sorry, the Wolfman, of course,
Yep.
all of whom spawned multiple sequels, spin-offs, different interpretations of the characters. These characters were taken and shoehorned into some like mashup ones in which there are multiple monsters featured, like Abbott and Costello stuff and everything,
like
where
crossovers. Yeah.
exactly into each other's worlds type of thing as well. All of those, and would continue to like bring people to the theater, is my understanding. Like that was really something that drew in massive audiences, which I always find funny. Like that's why people who like to criticize or say things about like like, oh, horror like fatigue or whatever, things like that, is I'm just like, I have to question people who make comments like that, because I'm like, horror fatigue, I'm like, are you seeing the numbers that like the latest Conjuring movie just brought in?
But it's so ridiculous to make that statement, because when you think about it, like historically, we've always been very drawn to like a macabre presentation. So if you watch movies that are supposedly historically accurate, where they're
Public
executing
execution.
someone
Thank you.
publicly,
Yep.
so you've got a whole audience for
Yes.
that, because people fucking
People
loved
used
it.
to do
They
that.
used to love watching
We
this.
think
It
about it
was
now,
a bit
we're
of
like,
tea.
that's
It's
fucked up.
horrific.
Yes.
But for them, that was a show.
Yes.
And again, I wasn't there at the
No.
time, but I'm assuming based on supposedly historically accurate, information.
Yeah.
But then move into, think about things like the circus, the first circuses.
True.
They always had like a freak
Freaks,
show.
yeah.
Freak show using quotes,
Yeah.
And now, we're talking about in the early, 1900s, them releasing these monster movies
Yep.
and it bringing out the crowds.
Yes.
Because
And
it's a spectacle. It's the macabre.
And it was the 30s. It was during the Depression.
Oh, yeah, well.
It was like people needed a level of escapism that I think other film probably would not have provided at that time, which I get the feeling may have contributed a little bit to the success of these characters as well in their adaptations. But nevertheless, it's also due to the casting, due to the aesthetic choices and like the character designs, due to the idea of like these types of scares being presented. Because yes, obviously, if you watch these films now, you tee-hee, obviously, because of like there are many moments of like silence and like awkward things, because we were just transitioning away from silent film to talkies, and so people were still becoming like getting used to having actual dialogue that was being spoken in films, and the delivery that would have to go along with that. So it's so funny, because if you think about it, all that's happened over the past like 100 years, which in the grand scheme of things is not that long. But that's like how much cinema itself has evolved in that way. And I mean, like, God, I think I took a look really quickly. I didn't write down exact numbers, but particularly, I will say all of them have had multiple interpretations. But particularly Dracula and Frankenstein's monster, each feature, I think, between films, TV shows, and like even stage adaptations and stuff, in well over like 500 productions each.
Oh, I'm not surprised. Like, think about even when they come out with like these like spooky ooky kids movies.
Correct.
There's always a Dracula.
Dracula,
There's
a little
always a Frankenstein.
Yeah.
There's always a werewolf. There's a, I mean, what was it? Hotel Transylvania.
Yes, he's got all of them. But
Well, he's got all of them. But you know what I mean? Like, there's always like a little cutesy character. They are always there.
Always.
You say the monsters, you say Universal monsters, you say Halloween, and you think of Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy,
all of
Creature
those.
from the Black Lagoon,
the Wolfman,
Frankenstein's monster, Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. And these ones that are arguably like very iconic. I mean, like, and exactly what we were saying, right? Like, we're still to this day, including this year, we are getting multiple new versions of things. We got a new Wolfman movie in January of this year. We are getting one new Frankenstein film before the end of this year. Obviously, Guillermo del Toro's interpretation of Frankenstein, as well as at the time that we're recording this, the trailer just dropped for Maggie Gyllenhaal's Bride.
Oh, yes.
Which looks very interesting. It is if you take Frankenstein and the Bride and you turn them into Bonnie and Clyde. That's like what you're getting in the film, which looks like a really interesting interpretation. I'm very curious to see that and see how that all comes together, because that one looks really interesting. And those are two wildly different versions based on the same story coming out in the same calendar year. And we exactly said this year as well. So it's not been released, I don't think, in North America, but there's a French produced film called Dracula, A Love Story.
That's right.
I believe directed by Luc Besson, of all people, who I was like, isn't he like an action director? That's an interesting choice. Which it was produced in France, and I believe has already had like a release in Europe. And I believe that we're getting it early in 2026.
Yes,
here.
I sent it to you the other day, and I was like, oh, we have to watch this.
Yeah.
Anything that has the word Dracula, I'm like, yeah, okay.
You're automatically like, oh, a new Dracula movie? Okay, yeah, that's it. It's like an automatic. I think we should. I think when we got to figure it out, like if it's getting like an actual release here or like what's happening. But whenever it comes out, we should watch it and do an episode about it, because I'm really curious to see, because that's something that you get a lot now with the Dracula character, is a much more romanticized version.
But you do with a lot of them, though.
Feels.
It's starting to. I mean, it's like inevitably you're gonna get there with most of these.
Yeah.
The more we think of different adaptations, different, angles for these characters, you're always going to land on a romance
100%
side of it.
Yeah, and I mean, so Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, I believe, premiered at TIFF. Thank you. And there was an article written by a critic in, I don't remember which publication, a large one, that there was some discourse around that I also came across and was like, oh gosh, which reminded me that when there are adaptations of classic literature being made, I believe it should, as often as possible, be a prerequisite for the critic reviewing the film to have read the novel.
Oh, I agree.
Because this person interpreted what basically indicated some level of surprise at how sympathetic the monster is portrayed as, and that they're not as monstrous, I guess, as expected. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Y'all can't see my face, but I'm like, what?
Yeah. And I saw a few people online kind of chatting about this to be like, wow, tell me you've never read the book without telling me you've never read the book, you know?
The whole point of Frankenstein is that you're supposed to sympathize with the monster. It's the whole point of the story.
Yeah.
And most of these monster stories is that these monsters are just a product of their environment.
100%.
And they are the way they are because of what the people around them did to them.
Because of their circumstances. The Wolfman is very largely like that as well. Creature from the Black Lagoon has that kind of vibe. And we've already, and again, I don't know why, even if Mary Shelley's novel did not already portray the monster in a sympathetic light, which it does, we've all seen The Shape of Water, so I don't think we should be surprised that Guillermo del Toro has a tendency to lean in favor of the monster.
It's true.
I don't think that we should forget that, maybe.
It's true. I mean, it reminds me of the man who had the insectarium here in Montreal,
Oh, gosh,
how
that's right.
he freaking loved the bugs,
God,
you
he
know,
loved
and
those
how
bugs.
he would say that, you know, our lives as humans are not worth as much as the insects. Because we think that we can stomp around and tell them what to do. It's the same thing with, like, I don't know, it's kind of like the vibe that you get from Guillermo del
It's
Toro.
true.
Like, it's like, not my monsters.
No, he's just like, they're so much better than the rest of us.
Exactly. Like, we must protect them.
100%. 100%. Anyway, I think all of that is just to kind of say, like, this felt like it would be like kind of a fun thing to touch on for Halloween itself.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, at least we can thank Universal for holding on to their IPs and, like, you know, continuing to, some of them are good, some of them are bad, but continuing to at least make it so that there are different interpretations of these characters that we can see and continue to go and see in the movie theater, which I think is still a really cool experience to have.
I agree. And when we went to Universal a few years ago, I remember seeing like all the merch that they had for the
Yeah.
monsters and thinking like, oh yeah, like they did keep it kind of retro and like a reminder that these stories
Or like what the
had like an
studio's kind
origin.
of built on to a degree.
Yeah, like there was an origination that was usually a book that was
Yes,
written.
yeah.
And then yes, there's been like a bazillion interpretations of it since, but let's remember what we started with,
Yeah.
and like, you know, how good these stories were to begin with.
100%. Anyway, so that wraps it up for us for the month of October. Thank you for joining us for this Spooky Yuki season. We're so happy. Spooky Yuki season's all year for me, so it's not going anywhere anytime
I was going to say,
soon.
now Megan just folds up into a ball and hibernates until next October.
We just pretend that I don't exist for the rest of the year.
We just like poke her and see how she's doing.
Anyway, so obviously next week we'll be coming at you guys with, you know, a new sort of slew of episodes for the month of November. We'll be heading away from this and kind of talking about some other stuff, maybe some new releases and some other things too that are happening in November. So that'll be fun. In the meantime, feel free to follow us on all of our socials, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky. Search for Fully Booked CA and you'll find us there. But until next month, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.